You stir too slow. The words weren't set, shouted. They didn't sit need to be. They landed in the room like a chair scraping across a quiet floor. Conversations stopped. A few heads turned. Someone laughed, then realized no one else was. Bruce Lee stood a few steps away, hands loose at his sides, eyes calm. He didn't set react, didn't smile, didn't set correct him. The smirk stayed on Jim Kelly's face just long enough for everyone to see it. This wasn't set a fight. No cameras rolling, no crowd cheering, just a public moment where pride stepped forward, and silence answered back. 14 seconds later, the room would feel different. Not louder, not violent, just changed. And everyone watching would know exactly when it happened. The line didn't echo. It didn't sit need to. You stir too slow. Jim Kelly said it like a fact he'd measured, like something the room should accept and move on from. For a second, the only sound was the faint shuffle of shoes on a wooden floor and the soft click of a stopwatch being set down. Then the air shifted. A few men near the mirrors stopped stretching. Someone halfway through a laugh swallowed it. A trainer Sesson's hand froze on a towel. Bruce Lee stood a few steps away in simple training clothes. Black pants, a dark top, his posture loose, almost casual. His hands hung open by his sides, as if they belonged to someone who never needed them raised. He didn't look offended. He didn't look amused. He simply turned his eyes toward Jim the way a calm lake reflects whatever approaches it. Jim held the smirk. He was young, strong, built for sharp movement. His breathing was steady, like a man still riding the confidence of a wind no one in the room could deny. He rolled his shoulders once, as if warming the sentence itself into the air. Bruce said nothing. That was the first micro moment. A silence so clean it made people aware of their own faces, their own hands, their own place in the room. Jim's smirk twitched, just slightly, as if he expected something back. A remark, a correction, a smile. Anything to make the moment normal again. Bruce didn't give him that. He took one slow step forward instead. Not aggressive, not rushed, just a step that reduced the space between them and increased the weight of every eye watching. Second micro moment. Jim's eyes stayed bright, but his jaw tightened a fraction. The room noticed, not because anyone spoke, but because bodies understand shifts faster than language. Bruce stopped within arm's reach and let his gaze settle, steady and direct. He didn't stare like a threat. He looked like a man listening for something deeper than words. Another beat passed. Then Bruce lifted his right hand, not into a guard, not into a fist. Two fingers extended casually, like he was about to point something out on a page. Jim didn't move at first. Pride kept him upright. Bruce's fingers hovered near Jim's chest, close enough to be felt, not close enough to touch. And Jim Sip's shoulders tensed anyway. Everyone saw that too. Bruce's voice, when it finally came, was quiet, almost gentle. Show me. No anger, no challenge wrapped in pride, just an invitation that sounded like truth. Jim blinked once, as if the room had tilted. Then he nodded slowly, because he could already feel what backing away would cost him. Around them, nobody spoke, but every person in that rehearsal space understood the same thing at the same time. This had already become public. And whatever happened next would not be forgotten. The room itself seemed to pull back, as if giving the moment space to breathe. Someone quietly slid a bench toward the wall. A bag was lifted, then set down somewhere else. Shoes shuffled into a loose half-circle without anyone giving instructions. It wasn't stat organized. It didn't need to be. This was instead a ring. No ropes, no judges, no applause waiting on the other side of effort. Just a rehearsal space that suddenly felt smaller because of what was about to happen inside it. Bruce stepped back half a pace, not retreating, just adjusting distance. His feet found the floor naturally, weight centered, knees soft. He didn't square up the way fighters usually did. No dramatic stance, no signal meant for spectators. Another micro moment. Jim noticed that first. He adjusted anyway. Habit took over. Front foot angled, hands lifted. Not exaggerated, not sloppy. This was the posture of someone who had trained long enough to trust his body without thinking. Bruce watched him, not his hands, not his shoulders, but the space between his breath and his balance. Around them, eyes tracked every inch of movement. The mirrors reflected the scene back at itself, doubling the tension, multiplying the stillness. A trainer near the back crossed his arms, then uncrossed them. Someone else leaned forward. then froze mid-motion. No one said Bruce Siff's name. No one said Jim Sepp's. Names would only shrink what was happening. Jim inhaled slowly through his nose, letting confidence settle where doubt might try to form. He'd earned his certainty. Speed wasn't an idea to him. It was something he'd proven under lights, under pressure against men who wanted to take trophies from him. He bounced once on the balls of his feet. Bruce didn't net mirror him. That difference mattered. Jim's eyes flicked down for a split second, checking distance, measuring reach. When they came back up, Bruce's gaze hadn't moved. Calm, present, uninterested in impressing anyone. Another pause stretched, this one longer. Not awkward, expectant. Jim realized then that no one was rushing him. No countdown, no signal. If this moment stretched, it would stretch because he allowed it to. That awareness tightened something behind his ribs. Bruce tilted his head slightly, as if acknowledging the weight without creating it. "You can start," he said softly. The words weren't set permission. They were confirmation. Jim nodded once, subtle, professional. He raised his guard a fraction higher, feeling the weight of attention settle fully onto his shoulders now. Every breath sounded louder than before. Every blink felt observed. Bruce exhaled slowly, letting his shoulders drop another inch, like a man removing weight no one else could see. Nothing had happened yet, and already the room was no longer the same one they'd been standing in minutes earlier. Jim moved first. Not fast, not slow, measured. He slid his lead foot a few inches forward, testing the floor, testing the space, testing Bruce's reaction. There was none. Bruce didn't flinch, didn't adjust, didn't mirror the motion. He simply let it happen, like water, allowing a stone to sink without ripples. Jim straightened his spine slightly, confidence returning to familiar ground. This was what he knew. Rooms like this, eyes watching, expectations hanging in the air. He'd grown up learning how to perform under attention, how to make movement look clean, how to make speed look undeniable. Judges loved clarity, crowds loved certainty, and Jim had built his reputation on both. He rolled his neck once, loose, relaxed. A small smile tried to come back, not mocking now, just steadying himself. Another micro moment. Bruce noticed the change in Jim's breathing before anyone else did. Shorter, more deliberate. The breath of someone preparing to show, not attack. Jim lifted his hands fully now. Classic, disciplined. Nothing sloppy. This wasn't arrogance. This was training speaking through muscle memory. "I'll go light," Jim said, not loudly, not for the room, almost for himself. Bruce nodded once. No correction, no warning. Jim stepped in, a quick jab, sharp and direct, snapping toward Bruce's face. Tournament speed, clean line. The kind of punch that scored points before opponents even registered it had landed. Bruce Sepp's hand moved. Not forward, not outward, sideways. Two fingers brushed Jim's wrist just enough to guide the punch past empty space. No impact, no sound, just redirection. Jim Sepp's jab missed. He reset instantly, barely pausing. A second punch followed, faster this time, sharper. Bruce's other hand rose, intercepted again earlier than before, as if it had been waiting at the destination. Another miss. Jim frowned, not in frustration, but confusion. He circled half a step, trying to change the angle. He threw again, a combination now. Jab cross, speed stacked on speed. Bruce didn't net retreat. He didn't instead advance. His hands moved in small arcs, economical, precise, touching Jim's arms the way one might adjust a sleeve. Each strike slid past. Each intention met before it finished forming. Jim felt it then. Not failure, interruption. Like being spoken over by silence. He stepped back, just a fraction, recalibrating. The room held its breath without realizing it. Bruce lowered his hands again. Jim Sepp's confidence hadn't vanished, but something new had entered the space between them, and it demanded attention. Jim adjusted his stance again, this time slower. Not because he was tired, because he was thinking. That alone was a shift. He rolled his shoulders back, grounding himself, then changed rhythm entirely. No more probing jabs. No more testing touches. He committed, a wider step, a sharper breath. His body turned as he launched a spinning back fist, the kind that punished hesitation and rewarded confidence. The room reacted before Bruce did. A few people leaned back instinctively. Someone inhaled sharply. Bruce Sipp's hand was already there. not chasing the strike, meeting it. His palm made contact near Jim's forearm at the exact moment the rotation peaked. Not a block, not a strike, just enough pressure to steal the turn from Jim's body. The spin died mid-motion. Jim stumbled half a step to recover his balance. Another micro moment. Bruce let his hand fall back to his side immediately. As if nothing unusual had happened, Jim straightened, eyes narrowed now, not angry but alert. He nodded once to himself. Fine, different approach. He stepped in close, closer than before. Chest nearly aligned, space compressed. This was where speed mattered most, where reaction time decided everything. Jim fired again. A fast sequence. 3 punches, no pause between them. Muscle memory doing what it had done 1,000 times before. Bruce Sipp's hands moved like quiet answers. Left, right, left. Each strike was met before it arrived. Not stopped at the end, but erased along the way. Jim felt his arms guided, redirected, softened into nothing. He was still throwing, but he wasn't set landing. That realization hit harder than any punch. Jim pulled back abruptly. Breath heavier now, chest rising faster than it should have. He looked at Bruce, really looked this time, searching for strain, for effort, for something to explain what was happening. There was none. Bruce's face remained composed, eyes focused but kind, like a teacher watching a student repeat a mistake without realizing it. The room was silent. Not tense silence, focused silence. Bruce stepped forward once, not into Jim Sepp's space, into the space Jim had just abandoned. He raised his hand again, fingers relaxed and gently tapped Jim's chest, just once. Barely contact, but Jim felt it, felt how open he had been, felt how easily that touch could have been something else. Bruce lowered his hand. "You're fast," he said quietly. "No edge, no correction, but you're showing me everything before it happens." He stepped back again, giving the space back. Jim stood there, arms lowered now, breathing uneven, his confidence no longer loud enough to hide the question forming behind his eyes. The room didn't step move, because everyone knew the balance had shifted, and no one was sure what Jim would do next. Jim didn't set answer right away. He didn't set need to. His hands stayed lowered, fingers flexing once, then still. His breathing slowed as he forced it back under control, the way fighters do when they realize they've crossed into unfamiliar ground. Around them the room waited, not impatiently, respectfully. This was the pause everyone felt, but no one dared to interrupt. Bruce stood where he was, not advancing, not retreating. His posture remained open, almost casual, as if the last exchange hadn't required any effort at all. The space between them felt wider now, even though neither man had moved much. Jim swallowed. For the first time since the smirk, he looked uncertain, not embarrassed, not angry, uncertain. That uncertainty was the turning point. He glanced briefly at the people watching, the trainers, fighters, men who understood speed and pressure. No one spoke, no one looked away. Their faces weren't hungry for humiliation. They were curious, quietly alert. Jim turned back to Bruce. "Again," he said, "not a challenge, a request." Bruce didn't answer with words. He nodded once, small and precise, like someone agreeing to continue a conversation rather than escalate it. Another micro moment. Jim stepped in, but this time his movement was different, less performance, more caution. He tried to disguise his intent, letting his shoulders stay loose, letting his hands drift before committing. Bruce watched the shift happen. He didn't react faster. He reacted earlier. Jim feinted left. Bruce's eyes didn't follow the feint. They stayed on Jim's center. When the real strike launched, Bruce's hand was already moving, not toward the fist but toward the space it would pass through. The strike died before it was born. Jim stopped mid-motion. That had never happened to him before. He took a step back without thinking, creating distance he hadn't meant to create. His chest rose, then fell. He shook his head once slowly, like someone waking from a convincing dream. Bruce didn't fill the space. He let the distance remain. Silence stretched again, heavier now, not with tension, but with realization. Jim looked down at his own hands, then back up at Bruce. "I didn't even finish deciding," he said quietly. Not for the room, for himself. Bruce's expression softened slightly. Not triumph, recognition. He said nothing. That silence did more than any explanation could. Jim nodded once, deeply this time. The smirk was gone, replaced by something steadier, something honest. He straightened his posture, not as a fighter now, but as a man standing at the edge of a new understanding, and the room felt it. Whatever came next wouldn't be about proving anything. It would be about choosing what to do with what had just been revealed. Bruce waited. He didn't set rush to fill the quiet. He didn't set explain what Jim had just felt. He allowed the moment to stand on its own. That was his discipline. Jim exhaled slowly, then nodded to himself, as if accepting something he hadn't planned to accept tonight. He stepped back another pace and lowered his hands fully, palms open, no longer in a guard. That choice mattered. Around them, a few men shifted their weight. Someone near the mirrors relaxed their shoulders. The room didn't explode with noise. It softened. Bruce took one step forward, not into confrontation, into clarity. You don't lose because you stare slow, Bruce said gently. You lose because you stare committed too late. He paused, letting the words settle without pressing them. Another micro moment. Jim listened without interrupting, eyes steady now, not defensive. The confidence he carried earlier hadn't vanished. It had changed shape. Bruce gestured lightly between them. You decide. Then you move. I see the decision. He tapped his own chest once. I don't wait for the hand. Jim absorbed that in silence. The explanation was brief, almost incomplete. Bruce wasn't teaching. He was pointing. Jim nodded again. So speed isn't speed. Bruce smiled faintly. Not correction, agreement. It's SEP's timing, Bruce said, and intention. He stepped back, returning the space to neutral. The exchange was over without anyone declaring it finished. Another shift rippled through the room. Someone finally spoke, quietly, like breaking a spell. That was different. Bruce turned toward the voice and inclined his head politely, acknowledging without engaging. Jim looked down at the floor, then up again, his gaze clearer now. Would you show me again? He asked. Not now, not tonight, just someday. Bruce considered him for a moment longer than before. I can show you principles, he said. But you have to let go of winning while you learn. Jim didn't hesitate. I can do that. Bruce nodded once. That was enough. He stepped away, reaching for a towel, wiping his hands as if he'd just finished a routine drill. The room slowly returned to motion. Bags picked up, shoes adjusted, conversations resumed at lower volumes. But something remained. Jim watched Bruce walk away, then looked at his own hands again. They felt the same, but he knew they weren't. The rehearsal space hadn't witnessed a defeat, it had witnessed a redefinition. And Jim understood that whatever he chose to do next would echo far beyond this room. The next evening, the room felt different before anyone spoke. Not quieter, more aware. Jim arrived early, earlier than usual. He stood near the wall at first, stretching slowly, deliberately, not out of habit, but intent. The confidence he carried now wasn't something he performed. It sat lower, steadier. When Bruce entered, conversations softened again. Not because of reputation, but because of memory. Bruce acknowledged no one directly. A nod here, a brief look there. He moved like someone stepping into water he already understood. Jim watched him from across the room, not with the hunger to test, but the patience to observe. That alone was another shift. Bruce stopped near the center of the floor, setting down his bag. He didn't call Jim over. He didn't invite attention. Jim approached on his own. They stood a few feet apart. No tension this time. No audience pressing in. Just space and choice. Bruce met Jim's eyes and waited. Jim bowed his head slightly. Not formal, sincere. I thought about what you said, he said quietly. About deciding too late. Bruce listened without reacting. Jim continued. Slower now. I've been fast for a long time. People told me that was enough. I stopped questioning it. Bruce nodded once. A small acknowledgement, not approval. You didn't stop learning, Bruce said. You stopped listening. The words weren't set sharp. They didn't need to be. Jim absorbed them. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. He simply nodded. Another micro moment. Bruce stepped to Jim's side and gestured toward the floor. Stand here, Jim did. No hesitation. Bruce raised one hand and placed it lightly against Jim's forearm. No force, no speed. Don't strike, he said. Just decide. Jim frowned slightly, confused, then closed his eyes for a breath. Bruce watched his shoulders, his breath. The smallest signals. Again, Bruce said softly. Jim inhaled, intention forming without movement. Bruce's hand moved immediately, touching Jim's arm before Jim even opened his eyes. Jim exhaled sharply, startled. I felt that, Jim said. Bruce nodded. Before you moved. They repeated it, again and again. Each time Bruce responded earlier. Each time Jim felt the gap between decision and action shrink in his awareness. No one around them spoke. They didn't need to. The room was a nest watching a lesson. It was watching a transformation begin. Jim opened his eyes and looked at Bruce, not as a challenger now, but as a guide standing just far enough ahead to be followed. Bruce released his arm and stepped back. This takes time, he said. Jim nodded. I have time. Bruce studied him for a moment, then allowed a faint smile. That was the final shift. Not mastery, not victory, commitment. And everyone in the room understood that whatever Jim would become next, it would start here in quiet repetition. Long after the noise of speed had faded, time changed the rhythm of the room. Not all at once, quietly, one repetition at a time. Weeks passed, then months. Jim kept coming. Not loudly, not announcing it. He arrived early, stayed late, listened more than he spoke. When Bruce corrected him, it was never with force, a touch to the wrist. A step taken half a second sooner, a pause that made Jim realize he had already decided before he moved. That was the work. Other fighters noticed, not because Jim talked about it, but because his movement began to look different, less sharp on the surface, more inevitable underneath. He still won, still moved fast. But now his speed felt calmer, as if it came from knowing rather than proving. One evening after training, Bruce stood near the doorway, tying his shoes. Jim approached, holding himself differently now, not tentative, grounded. I used to think being challenged meant defending myself, Jim said quietly. Now I see it meant being shown something. Bruce looked up, meeting his eyes. You weren't set wrong before, he said. You were incomplete. Jim nodded. That felt true. Bruce finished tying his shoe and stood. Most people never let that moment happen, he said. They protect the version of themselves they already understand. Jim watched him for a second. You didn't embarrass me. Bruce shook his head slightly. That would have taught you nothing. Another micro moment. They walked out together into the night. No ceremony, no audience. Years later, when cameras rolled and lights burned hot, Jim would stand across from Bruce again, this time on a set in front of the world. Their movements would look sharp, powerful, unforgettable. Audiences would see speed, precision, control. They wouldn't see the 14 seconds. They wouldn't see the pause, the silence, the moment when a smirk faded and curiosity took its place. But Jim would remember, every time someone asked him about mastery, he never talked about winning. He talked about the day he was too certain. The day someone stood in front of him, said almost nothing, and changed the way he measured himself forever. Not by proving him wrong, by leaving him room to grow. The room, the silence, the choice, those stayed with him. Long after the speed no longer needed to,